I model upon you in Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. The blessing of the day of Judas. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathanawa, Hayawam, Yahweh, Bashalawam, Thawada, Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the day of Judas in peace. Thank you, so be it. Ha'ayim Ma'ad Asherayim Akkad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Mayanyam Ya Al Hahayim Mayan Yabawa Isaiah Yabawa Mayahawa Shai Shemayim Warataza La'a Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yala'a Yanawam Shashamarka Hana La'a Yanawam Wala'a Yashun Shashuama Yashirala Yahweh Shemaya Yahweh Tazaya Ayel Ya Yan Yawamam Hashemash La'a Hakaya Wayarak La'a Balayala Yahweh Yashemaya Makal Ra Yashema Napasha Yahweh Yashema Hawalakia Wabawaya Ma'aitha Wa'aid Iwalam Bahasham Yahawashai Thawada Aman. Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper, the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen. Shema Yasharella, hear, O Israel. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh Akkad. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh Akkad. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh Akkad. Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one Lord. Thapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abba Yanawa, Sheba Shemayim, Kodash, Haya, Shamka, Yahweh, Malakwethka, Thaba'a, Ratazawanka, Haya, Aisha, Ba'arataza, Ka, Bashamayim, Lathananawa, Lakham, Yawam, Za, Wasalaklanawa, Kababathnawa, Kasalaknawa, Kababathyanawa, Wala'a, Habiyanawa, O Nasayawan, Abo, Hawashinawa, Marai, Kaya, Laka, Hamalakwath, Waha'ala, Wahatha Pa'arath, La'aywalam, Aman. Matthew 6:9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Ha'ashara Matazawaf, the Ten Commandments. La'ah, Yahaya, Laka, Alahayim, Akaryim, Alpanya. La'ah, Tha'aisha, Laka, Pasol, Wala'ah, Tha'ibadam. La'ah, Thalakwakath, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayaka, Lashawa. Zakar, Ath, Hayawum, Hashabath, La Kodashwa. Kabad, Abiaka, Wa Amaka. La'ah, Tharatazat, La'ah, Thana'at, La'ah, Thakanab, La'ah, Tha'ainah, Shakur, La'ah, Thachamad, Ko, Asherah, Lara'ayaka, Aman. Exodus 20:3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen. Shabbat, be seated. Barakatha Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Par Yahagabin, Thwada Aman, La Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Ath, Yasha Allah. English translation: Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, or the Most High, in the name of Christ, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. I madra upon you, Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem, which is facing towards the east. Barakatha Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakhwam, Abiyah, Wanara'a, Aliyawan, Malak, Shal, Shemayim, Wa'arataza, Wako, Debayim, Kayayam, Wagam, Hamashiach, Ma Yahweh, Arawanawa, Ahabnawa, Hapala, Yahweh Aitaza, Yahweh Shai, Zakarnawa, Yahweh, Barataza 1, Ainka, Yasha Allah, Izanawa, Bana, Wasap, Yasha Allah, Oh, Nanawa, Yum Yun, Aitha, Kayawamyum, Makwadam, Baba Kwasha, Shalat, Mayaka Allah, Wahatazawadat, Alahayam, La, Maganawa, Rapanawa, Washama, Alnawa, Baiko, Shalak, Haroka, Sho, Yahawashai, Lanawa, Lalamanawa, Rabiam, Kakama, Wada, Salak Kakama, Thabawana, Wada Aith, Shon, the Baraka, Basham, Yahawashai, so Wada, Thumb Yad, Wa Iwalam, Aman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living. And also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember us, Yahweh, favorably, your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel. Most High, we beg you right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shah to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shah, thank you always and forever. So be it. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shah that gives to us the law. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Hashabath. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shah that gives to us light to see. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Awo, Lara Awath. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shah that gives to us the ram sworn to call the people. Barakatah Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Koran, Ha'ayo, La Korah, Ha'aim. Yeshabwa, be seated. All right. Shalom, shalom. Ashar Yawam Yahawada, or Happy Day of Judas. Right? Again, Happy Day of Judas, or Ashar Yawam Yahawada, which is the literal translation, Happy Day of Judas. Yahawada being Judas, the same thing you would say for Judah. Judas is the same. All right. So this is the day we'll be coming together to go into the history and to acknowledge one of our ancient ancestors, our forefathers, who was able to righteously stand up and defend the nation of Israel from the onslaught of the Greeks at that time, around the 1st century BC, when they came to take over and conquer and destroy us as a people. Right. So we're going to go into a bit of this history today, this evening, to understand why we celebrate and honor this man, along with those who are with him, that righteously stood up for us with the help of the Most High. A lot of times when we look into the scriptures, we read a lot of things pertaining to law, but also testimony as well as fruits of the Spirit. But it was interesting. I was watching today, this morning on the news, and it was an Amalekite. When we say Amalekite, it means someone who was of the descendant of Esau, who has now become a convert and has followed after the traditions of our ancient ancestors. Some of them were taught these laws, taught our culture, and even today, throughout the times of our captivities, have now think to themselves that they are the people of ancient antiquity, being the Jews. But according to history, they are not. But they do not know it. They still have inherited lies from their forefathers that have been passed down. But through the scriptures, through the beauty of the mercy of the Most High, we do have these records to go through and prove who we are and how the Most High has helped to defend us as a nation, even though we know we've still fallen to temptation, we've broken the commandments of the Most High, and then we did still now fall into captivity under other nations, specifically Esau or Edom here in these last days. But we do have opportunities to go back and reflect on times when the Most High did deliver us. And why that's important is because we are embarking on another deliverance coming out of this captivity. So we are waiting to see our Savior, our Redeemer, Yahweh Shai, who in modern day terms in English, they say Jesus Christ, but in Hebrew, it is He saves, Yahweh Shai, who is coming with thousands upon thousands of angels in the chariots of the Lord, which we call so-called UFOs. These are the ones that's coming to redeem us. Now, most people may think of that as, some kind of spook witchcraft thing that you're dealing with. What are you talking about, chariots? This is some made up fable thing that you guys are dealing with, some cult. But when you read the scriptures, and a lot of times history tries to erase some of these things because they don't want us to really fully get in tune with what the Most High has used to help us when it came time for redemption or saving us from our enemies in the past. He's going to do those same thing in the future soon to come, right? So reading these history and going through these precepts kind of reaffirms our faith, kind of brings us back to now removing and pushing away that fear that most people have right now, especially with what's going on in the world, right? Right now, what's going on in the world is the beginnings of World War III, right? Even though it's not World War III per se, as far as for the host of the most of the nations gathered together, but it is the beginning of it. So now when you get into the beginnings of World War III, and if you've been following the prophecies, you know World War III will be a nuclear war, right? Russia has already started to make mention of nuclear weapons. Joe Biden, the so-called president of the United States of America, has also mentioned that this would now begin to the usage of nuclear weapons in this type of a war because of the nations that's going to be participating in them, right? It is known. So now once you hear that, you say to yourself, well, what the heck is going to be left for me? How am I going to be saved? How am I going to be redeemed when that happens? The whole world is going to go blow up. Well, we have the Most High as our Savior. We have Jesus Christ or Yahweh Shai as our Redeemer. So they are the ones that are going to come and remove us from even having to now receive any of those judgments or punishments that's going to happen to the rest of the world for their disobedience of the Most High's commandments. So in order for us to keep our minds going in the right path on that straight and narrow, it's days like this that the Most High has us come together, whether we're physically here, listening on the teleconference line, or watching on the live stream. It now will begin to reaffirm our faith and also give us clear understanding on how we're going to make it out of here, what we must do and how we make it out of here. All right. So the day is just not for us to just come and we sit and we hear things and then we eat after the fact, but it's supposed to reaffirm your spirit, reaffirm your faith in this truth, because it's easy to get complacent. It's easy to now start to look for other things for succor or to save you, right? Meaning this might not be enough, right? So you might want to go get something else or find something else where, not to say that tangible things will not be an aid, but it should not be your trust. It should not be where your faith lies. All right. So with that, we're going to go into the history pertaining to the day of Judas Maccabees. When you go into the world, they'll say the day of Nicanor. but we're not giving honor to Nicanor, right? It's not his day. It's Judas's day, right? This is who we now give honor to. And even though he was destroyed, we don't give him that glory to say that this is his day. It is Judas Maccabee's day as far as for what he did. So now, if you have your High Holy Day flyers, you know the history. We put on the flyers to read First Maccabees, the 7th chapter, read First Maccabees, the 14th and the 15th chapter, right? We're going to primarily deal with Second Maccabees, the 14th and 15th chapters. We're going to primarily deal with Second Maccabees, the 14th and the 15th chapters. We may jump back a little bit into First Maccabees 7 just to get a little bit of history, and then we'll continue on. But before we get into that, I want to jump into a little bit of history, a little bit of insight about this man named Nicanor, right? Because this is not the first encounter that we're going to be reading pertaining to this day that deals with Nicanor. Nicanor had already come a little bit previous to the situation that we're about to read at hand. So I'm just going to read a quick few precepts as it pertains to Nicanor himself and what happened with him, and then we'll transfer over to really getting into the day itself. All right. So we're going to read First Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. First Maccabees, the 3rd chapter. Today is 13th. Today is the 13th. Okay. Just give me 1 second. All right, so we have First Maccabees, chapter 3. We're going to read from verse 38. First Maccabees, chapter 3, and verse 38. So again, this is around the 1st century BC, somewhere around 150, 160 BC in that time frame where these events had taken place during the Greek Empire, all right? It says, First Maccabees 3:38, then Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Dormenius, and Nicanor, and Georgius, mighty men of the king's friends. And with them, he sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judea and to destroy it as the king commanded, right? So this was an invasion. Same thing like how we're talking about Russia invaded Ukraine, but this was even worse, right? Because those are the same people, right? The Ukrainians and the Russians are from the same tribes of people, just now separated as different kingdoms, right? But when you see this is 2 different nations, 2 different kingdoms or realms that one is now trying to invade. 2 different cultures. We didn't speak the same language, although based on oppression, sometimes we speak the language of our oppressor or our captors. But these are 2 different nations, 2 different cultures of one trying to invade another. So it said there was 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen that was sent into the land to destroy it. It says in verse 40, so they went forth with all their power and came and pitched by Emmaus in the plain country. Now check this out. Verse 41 says, and the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, speaking about the fame of the Greeks and how they had their military and their power, it says, took silver and gold very much with servants and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria and of the land of the Philistines joined themselves unto them. So this wasn't just the Greeks. The Syrians were also a part of this invasion, as well as the Philistines. So you had the Hamites, you had the Syrians, and you had Esau that now all joined forces to come and take down, as we would say, little old us, right? With all of them people. It didn't even mention the amount of people that came with those other nations, but just alone to know that they heard the fame of them, that they were coming to also take us as slaves, to destroy us, and then to take some of us as servants back home to their own homeland, right? So this man, Nicanor, that we're going to read about was already a part of another situation that had happened with Israel. Now, let's jump to see what happened with this particular situation and how, if it was successful or not, right? So that was First Maccabees chapter 3, verses 38 to 41. Now let's jump to Second Maccabees chapter 8. 2 Maccabees chapter 8. So now we're going to jump down to chapter 8, and we're going to start from verse 10. So it says, so Nicanor undertook to make so much money of the captive Jews as should defray the tribute of 2,000 talents, which the king was to pay to the Romans, right? So here it is. You had Nicanor, who was sent on assignment by his king, which was of the Greeks. They were looking to now, he was looking to make so much money that he would take some of that money that he was going to now use for selling slaves to these other nations to help pay some tribute money to the Romans, right? Because there's a other history between the Greeks and the Romans that was going on at this time. When a nation takes over a nation, sometimes it's not, or empire, a kingdom takes over one. It's not within 1 year or 2 years. Sometimes it takes a long time for that conquest to happen. So he was going to use the servants, the slaves of Israel, as tribute money to pay off the Romans for his king, right? It says in verse 11, wherefore immediately he sent to the cities upon the seacoast, proclaiming a sale of the captive Jews and promising that they should have 70 bodies for 1 talent, not expecting the vengeance that was to follow upon him from the Almighty God. So he was already thinking of the battle being won and start posting signs and sending out sale for slaves and how much money one servant was going to be worth, right? But the scripture says he didn't think about that the Most High was going to come in and intervene. The Most High was going to be the one that was going to put vengeance upon him for now coming against the apple of his eye, right? So again, this is a separate situation, but now let's see what transpires. Let's jump down to verse 21. It says, thus, when he had made them bold with these words and ready to die for the laws and the country, it says he divided his army into 4 parts and joined with himself his own brethren, leaders of each band, to wit, Simon and Joseph and Jonathan, giving each one 1,500 men, right? So this is Judas now preparing himself to go to war with these Greeks and now all these other nations, the Syrians and the Philistines, that have also come into the fight. So he divided his camps up with his brothers. Simon being one of his brothers, Jonathan being one of his brothers as well. They now each had their own camp. Then he also brought the man named Joseph to come help and fight. But before the fight, he had to now go inspire the people to go and defend their land, defend the people, and defend and stand up for the laws of the Most High. That's what we're doing, right? We're standing up for righteousness. It's the same thing that we're going to do right now in these last days, right? Fighting off spiritual wickedness, but also now defending our righteous name, defending our glorious Savior, Yahushua, right? Defending his name as well until he comes back and he could stand up for himself and defend us. Now, reading on, it says in verse 23, it says, also he appointed Eleazar, his other brother, to read the holy book. And when he had given them this watchword, the help of God, himself leading the first band, he joined battle with Nicanor. So now it wasn't just even a battle. Sometimes you got to go and read the holy book, read those inspiring words, go back and see how the Most High defended us in time past during other conflicts, during other sieges. What did the Most High do? And what kind of strait was we in? What kind of bind were we in where our back was against the wall and the Most High had to come out and defend us, or put might and strength in our hands that we were so outnumbered that the Most High would then give us the strength of battle that we can take down any innumerable force, right? It says, verse 24, it says, and by the help of the Almighty, they slew about 9,000 of their enemies and wounded and maimed the most part of Nicanor's host, and so put all to flight, right? it says, now we went and got the upper hand. We began to kill and slaughter some of them until most of them started to run, right? Not only that, it says in verse 25, and took their money that they came to buy them and pursued them far, but lacking time, they returned. For it was the day before the Sabbath day, and therefore they would no longer pursue them. So they went and defeated them. The money that they was using to come and take for themselves as slaves, they took that money, right? And said they was going to go and continue to pursue, but the Sabbath day was approaching. So they still wanted to keep and honor the seventh day Sabbath and worship the Most High. They stopped and then returned back to go and give honor and glory to the Most High, right? So again, this is something that happened on a separate occasion with Nicanor and how the Most High allowed us to defeat him. We didn't kill him at that time. They ran off, right? Jump down to verse 34, right? Jump down to verse 34. So now it says, as for the most ungracious Nicanor, who had brought 1,000 merchants to buy the Jews, he was through the help of the Lord brought down by them, of whom he made least account, and putting off his glorious apparel and discharging his company, he came like a fugitive servant through the midland unto Antioch, having very great dishonor, for that his host was destroyed. So initially he came with so much pride, but then he was now left fleeing, him having to even take off his glorious apparel and now be forced to flee and run back to Antioch like a fugitive, because we was trying to chase them to get to him, but he left and ran off. But the Most High gave us the victory against an innumerable force, right? Along with merchants of the people that came to buy us. It says in verse 36, thus he that took upon him to make good to the Romans their tribute by means of the captives in Jerusalem told abroad that the Jews had God to fight for them, and therefore they could not be hurt, because they followed the laws and he gave them, right? So here is another time, because we read before in the book of Judas, the 5th chapter, how the nations then at that time knew that they could not come and take us down if we were following the laws of our God, right? That was during the time of Judas. Now here it is during the times of the Greeks and Romans. They now are aware of if we are keeping the commandments of the Most High. This is why we always now say that the foundation, that the most important thing is the keeping of God's commandments. They knew this. This is why when they came with religion, this is why when they came with Catholicism and Christianity and Baptist religion and Methodist religion, all of those religions pushed the agenda of you don't have to keep God's commandments anymore. Whereas you read throughout the history, they were aware that if we kept these laws, no one could do us no hurt, that the Most High would fight for us. So it's a conspiracy, even on a religious agenda, to have that narrative pushed. So anytime anyone comes up to you and they say, listen, you don't have to keep the laws of God anymore, make sure you try and reference these historical accounts of how these other nations knew that God's commandment for his chosen people, so-called Negroes, so-called Hispanics, so-called Native American Indians, these people, if they kept these laws, there could nothing come upon them, that the Most High would fight for them, right? So this is the first account of what happened with Nicanor. He was left fleeing and running because we was on point and the Most High was fighting for us, all right? So that's just a precursor to what we're about to get into now. So now, let's jump forward to 2 Maccabees, the 15th chapter, right? 2 Maccabees, the 15th chapter. So if you missed those verses, again, I'll reread them. This is 1 Maccabees, it was 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verses 38 to 41. Again, that's 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verses 38 to 41. I then read 2 Maccabees chapter 8, verses 10 to 11. And then I jumped down to verse 21 and read all the way to verse 27. And then I jumped down from there and read from 34 to 36, right? 34 to 36. That gave us insight on Nicanor, history, a little preface on history, Nicanor, and how we counted him in a previous battle, right? All right. So now let's go to 2 Maccabees chapter 14, verse 1. And it reads, it says, after 3 years was Judas informed that Demetrius, the son of Seleucus, having entered by the haven of Tripolis with a great power and navy, had taken the country and killed Antiochus and Lysias, his protector, right? Because during this time, you had different people who were set up to be a ruler, or they were jockeying to be rulers of the realm, right? And then you had Antiochus, who had died, and he had set his son up and left him with Lysias. But now, Demetrius, now coming back home from being a prisoner, he now had the position to be king, and he went and then had young Antiochus killed along with his protector, right? So now there was no one who could now stand up and fight for that position of being king, because he had now removed those who would be an enemy to the throne. It says in verse 3, now one alchemist who had been high priest and had defiled himself willfully in the times of their mingling with the Gentiles, seeing that by no means he could save himself, nor have any more access to the holy altar, right? So now here it is. This is a Jew, this is an Israelite, a Levite, but he was a wicked man. He was a wicked Levite, right? And he wanted to now take the position of being high priest. And now not only did he want to take the position of being a high priest, and he was wicked, he did it also to the detriment of his own people, right? He went out there and murdered his own people in order to get that position. That's why it says that he defiled himself willfully, because he had joined himself with the nations. He had joined himself with the Greeks, right? He was in an alliance. He was willing to go and follow after their customs and follow after their traditions, as long as they gave him a position. Whole list. Let's go back to 2 Maccabees, 1 Maccabees, the 7th chapter. 1 Maccabees chapter 7. So we're going to read 1 Maccabees chapter 7, verse 12. Get a little bit more insight into this man, alchemist, right? I'm going to start at verse 5, right? And then we're going to jump down. So this is first Maccabees chapter 7, verse 5. It says, there came unto him all the wicked and ungodly men of Israel, having alchemists who was desirous to be high priest for their captain. And they accused the people to the king, saying, Judas and his brethren, having slain all thy friends and driven us out of our land. So this man, alchemist, who was a priest, wanted to gain the position. So he joined with all those others who had defiled themselves within the Greek tradition in order to gain comfort, gain authority, right? To not be an outcast within your own home. They sided with them. Alchemist was one of them. So let's jump down to verse 12 and see what he did. It says, then did there assemble unto alchemists and Bacchides a company of scribes to require justice. So now as these men are coming into the land, because again, he was petitioning to be high priest, but Israel would not allow it, right? So now he's looking for an opportunity. So now he's joined himself with one of the heathen, and now he's coming to Judea. So now the scribes of our people have now come to now have a sit down in a meeting to require justice as far as for what was going on with us as a people and the Greeks and those who had aligned with the Greeks, because they were putting us in jeopardy. It says in verse 13, now the Assyrians were the first among the children of Israel that sought the peace of them. So the Assyrians were a group of people who were Israelites who had now separated themselves to now defend the laws of the Most High. You read about them in First Maccabees, the 2nd chapter, right? The Assyrians who joined forces with Maccabees and his brothers and those that were like them. So it said these men, the Assyrians, were the first among the children of Israel that sought the peace of alchemists, Bakkides, and whoever there was with them, right? They didn't come with weapons and things of that nature. They just came to have a sit down. It says in verse 14, for said they, one that is a priest of the seed of Aaron is come with this army, and he will do us no wrong. He's a Levite. He's a priest. So he got an army of people with him, but he's not going to do us no wrong because he's one of us as a high priest. It says in verse 15, so he spake unto them peaceably and sware unto them, saying, we will procure the harm neither of you nor your friends. We're not going to do anything to you. We're brothers, right? This is a peaceable conversation. Verse 16, whereupon they believed him, howbeit he took of them 60 men and slew them in one day according to the words which he wrote, right? So took their kindness for weakness and slew them, right? They should have realized that this man was wicked. Even though he was a priest, even though he was a Levite, he had already picked a side. He had already joined forces with them. So it shows you got to be very mindful of those who you're around. That's why the scripture tells you, try the spirit by the spirit. So the spirit says that the things in his movement that he was doing, he wasn't a righteous man. So they should have been a little bit more circumspect with that man, along with the accompanying of those heathen. And unfortunately, it cost them their lives. 60 men had to die of the Assyrians. It says in verse 17, the flesh of thy saints have they cast out, and their blood have they shed round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them. Wherefore the fear and dread of them fell upon all the people, who said, there is neither trust nor righteousness in them, for they have broken the covenant and oath that they made. So now it was now widely known that this man, alchemist, was not for his people. He was against his people because he had made an alliance with the Greeks in order to gain the position, right? So now there's discord with him and those who are like him that now defile themselves with the heathen. So that's this man, alchemist, that we're reading about now in 2 Maccabees, the 14th chapter. So let's go back. So again, we read from 2 Maccabees chapter, we read 1 Maccabees, chapter 1. 1 Maccabees chapter 7, we read from verse 5 down to verse 6. And then we jumped down and read from 12 to 18. Again, that's 1 Maccabees chapter 7, verses 5 to 6, and then 12 to 18. All right, so now we're back in 2 Maccabees chapter 14, and we're going to reread verse 13 and then continue on. It says, now one alchemist who had been high priest and had defiled himself willfully in the times of their mingling with the Gentiles, seeing that by no means he could save himself, nor have any more access to the holy altar, came to King Demetrius in the 150th year, presenting unto him a crown of gold and a palm, and also the bowls which were used solemnly in the temple. And so that day he held his peace, right? So now you've seen it in the past where there were times when Israel wanted to show favor unto the other nations. And they went and took sometimes holy vessels or things that pertain to the sanctuary to give as a peace offering to those who they were looking for to gain some type of upper hand or position or protection. So that's what this man did. This is what alchemists did. He went and got gold and psalms and bowls that was used in the temple. We read about that during the time of the Feast of Tabernacles, as well as the Feast of the Rededication of the Altar, where you put the bowls from the goodly trees around your houses and we put them in the temple. So he went and took those bowls types and gave them to Demetrius as an offering, right? Because again, he's trying to get a position out of him as being the high priest. It says in verse 5, howbeit, having gotten opportunity to further his foolish enterprise, and being called into counsel by Demetrius, and asked how the Jews stood affected and what they intended, and he answered thereunto. So him being a Jew, they wanted to use him as a turncoat, as a traitor, right? What is their intentions? What are they looking to do, right? What is their situation right now? Give us the intel. So this is what they're coming to Demetrius. I'm sorry, this is what Demetrius is coming to Alchemist for, to get information. So he's coming to now present gifts and offerings, and now they're looking at, all right, bring him in, call him in. Let's see what he's going to tell us about his people, right? Verse 6, those of the Jews that be called the Sidonians, whose captain is Judas Maccabeus, nourish war and are seditious, and will not let the realm be in peace. So this is when they talk about there's two sides to every story, because from the side that Judas Maccabeus and our people who are on the righteous side would say, these individuals, these heathen came into our land and told us that we couldn't keep our laws anymore. They went and defiled our temple. They forced us to not keep the Sabbath days and to circumcise your sons. And if you did not obey, they would kill you and murder you. And all they were doing was defending themselves. They were defending their homes, defending their temple. But one of our own said that we were nourishing war and were seditious. And then it says, and would not let the realm be in peace. It's the same thing how narratives get spun even in today's times, or even 50 years or 100 years before, about us as a people, right? There's false narratives that now have been said. The same thing happened during the time of Esther. When we go into Purim the next 2 days, you're going to read about false narratives about people now claiming us to be the wicked ones when we're the righteous ones, and all we want is just peace for ourselves. We don't bother and harm no one else. Everyone wants something from us, or wants us to change and be like them, or follow their ways and follow their laws, when we just want to be left alone. And if we're not left alone, then they're trying to come and take us down. And then sometimes you have those who within our nation who become traitors to the nation and to the Most High and Christ. And that's what we're reading right now. So as we read on, it says in verse 7, therefore I, being deprived of mine own ancestors' honor, I mean the high priesthood, am now come hither. So it's as if we was preventing him from his rightful position as far as for being high priest, even though when you read it, he was wicked, right? And that's why he could not take that position. Reading on, verse 8, it says, first, verily, for the unfeigned care I have of things pertaining to the king, and secondly, even for that I intend the good of mine own countrymen, for all our nation is in no small misery through the unadvised dealing of them aforesaid. So we just read already in 2 Maccabees, the 8th chapter, I'm sorry, 1 Maccabees, the 7th chapter, what he had just done, right? He just came with Bakkads into Jerusalem and slaughtered 60 score men who came and was offering peace. And then he went and did this and then left and came back and now is giving this lie of a report, right? So that's why sometimes you got to pay attention or watch the information that you receive. We was checking this out yesterday after the Sabbath service, as far as for who controls the narrative, right? On a global scale, who controls the narrative? And it was showing how all of these major companies, these CEOs, right? You had some former person who was either in the military or some form of intelligence agency that's now within these organizations helping to control the narrative, right? You have certain countries that don't allow certain information into their country, as well as others, because they want to control the narrative. They're not about what is, right? Because what is the truth, the real truth, it now may condemn them. So they want to have, be in a position where they're shown as being the righteous or being the ones who are in the right? So now as you read on, verse 9, wherefore, O king, seeing thou knowest all these things, be careful for the country and our nation, which is pressed on every side, according to the clemency that thou readily show us unto all. So with this false information, he's making it appear that he needs to come and help Jerusalem by now putting people of his choosing, which would be one alchemist, to now go in and make everything right. This guy is the one that's the cancer. This Judas and his followers, they're the ones that's the problem. We got to go eradicate them so that we can have peace within the realm, right? It says in verse 10, for as long as Judas liveth, it is not possible that the state should be quiet, right? As long as he's breathing, there's always going to be contention. You've seen what this man has done. He's taken down many of forces, outnumbered, and they still were able to be victorious in their conquest, right? So we got to do something, because if we don't, it's not going to be quiet in the land. But from his perspective, he just wanted that position. He wanted to be high priest to go and do more wickedness. Reading on, verse 11. This was no sooner spoken of him, but others of the king's friends, being maliciously set against Judas, did more incense Demetrius. So after Alchemist came and said what he said, then you had others who came in and echoed everything that he had just said to more incense him and to getting him angry and angrier, to making him now make a decision to do something about this individual, right? So of course now something has to be done. You got those of your friends, you got this man who is an Israelite himself, who's coming and saying that the one problem is this one man. How can this one man cause such a stir? How could he cause such a commotion or a problem? Should be easy for us to go and take him out in order to now have peace within their realm. Now it says in verse 12, and forthwith calling Nicanor, who had been master of the elephants and making him governor over Judea, he sent him forth. So that's why I wanted us to read already what happened with Nicanor before times, because he had already come and tried to take down Judas and the Assyrians. He had already come to try to take us as slaves, and he was what? Put to flight, right? So now, through other conquests, when you read throughout Maccabees, through this battle of fight in Tripolis, he went in and was able to acquire elephants, right? Elephants was able to be acquired because now when you have a band of elephants that's marching through the land, that puts everyone else at a disadvantage. Right now, we've grown up in a time where there's fighter jets and tanks and missiles and all these other different things, but we didn't have that back then during the times of the Greeks, right? There were swords and things of that nature where people fought with, right? So it was hand-to-hand combat. But now if you got elephants and a whole core of band of elephants that's marching and coming through the realm, and you are now standing there with a sword, they could easily trample over you. So that's what now he was able to now acquire, to now come back again to fight against Judea. So we already read that he had disdain and hate for the Israelites. This was a man who did not like Israel at all, especially after what just happened, because he was embarrassed. So now he has to come back and get his name back, right? He has to come back and get revenge on Israel for what they had done before, embarrassing him and treating him like a fugitive. So now Demetrius set him up as the governor over a realm that he didn't even conquer yet. He's now governor over Judea, right? This is the pride that they have. I'm going to give you this title. You're a governor, and I need you to go and take down Judas Maccabees and the Assyrians for me, for us, right? This is what they're saying. Verse 13, commanding him to slay Judas and to scatter them that were with him and to make alchemists high priests of the great temple, right? So again, right, you take out Judas, you take out the Assyrians, and now you are governor. As you are governor, this guy who just came in, who's a traitor, make him high priest. Because remember, these people didn't really care about our God or our laws, right? They just saw that as just something that we was doing. So yeah, he can have that position because he's the one that's coming and giving us the intel. So we'll throw you a bone, we'll throw you a crumb, and you can take that position. But Nicanor is going to be governor to watch over the realm and then now give us report as far as for what's going on. It's like another outpost or garrison that's being established as you're building up your empire. That's why this war that's going on now is very interesting that most people don't realize, because that's one of the fears that Russia or Putin had, was that they would now be at a disadvantage if Ukraine now became a part of NATO, because they would have other outposts or other stations that is within Ukraine to now border Russia, right? So they didn't want to do that, right? They said, listen, we just, there's too many oppositions against us. Geography, economics, right? Power, political power. It's just too much against us. So we got to take the initiative, right? And that's what they did. So in this case, someone has to take the initiative to make this thing now right in their eyes. And this is what they did. So now reading on, it says in verse 14, it says, then the heathen that had fled out of Judea from Judas came to Nicanor by flocks, thinking the harm and calamities of the Jews to be their welfare. So as we was reading before, during the times of the rededication of the altar, right? When we read from chapter 1 to verse 4, chapter 4 in First Maccabees, starting from Judas's father, Mattathias, they was going through, and even Israelites who was following after the customs of the Greeks, they were slaying or killing them, right? And then the Greeks themselves, or the Gentiles that was in our realms, they was doing the same to them and putting some to flight, right? People was fleeing out of the land. So this is what we're reading, that the heathen that was within Judea, they was being put to flight. So once they heard about Nicanor now being the governor of the realm, they went to him for support because of what was going on. It says in verse 15, now when the Jews heard of Nicanor's coming, and that the heathen were up against them, that they cast earth upon their heads and made supplication to him that hath established his people forever, and who always helped his portion with manifestation of his presence, right? So we was reading this during Friday night's class when we was reading St. John, the 9th chapter, about the man that was born blind. We was going to the topic of reincarnation and what was the cause of this man being born blind. Did he sin or his parents sin? And Yahushua said, this man nor his parents sin, but that the manifestation of the Most High God was now being executed through him. Meaning the Most High sometimes shows his power through men. He'll show his power through judgment. He'll show his power about the punishment of the nations. So this is what we now had to refer back to, how the Most High can now use certain events to manifest himself, to let the other people know that the Most High is real and that Israel is his chosen people. This has to happen, and it's going to also happen again in these last days, right? That's something that we're waiting on, because without the Most High, how are we going to be able to fight? How are we going to be able to be saved? Because we are the Most High's chosen people. In Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 9, it says, for the Lord's portion is his people, right? We are the Most High's portion or his people. So he's always going to come to our aid or to our defense in time of need, right? There's no way getting around it. If we are doing what's right, the Most High is going to come and redeem his portion. It says Jacob is the lot of his inheritance, right? So out of all, when it says Jacob is the lot is talking about that land and that group of people. Out of any place on the earth, the land of Israel is the Most High's chosen place. And out of any nation in the earth, the nation of Israel is the Most High's chosen nation of all nations. So with that, the Most High has consistently shown how he comes to the aid to defend and protect his people. All right. So now let's go back. Chapter 14 of 2nd Maccabees, and we have verse 16 now. And it reads, it says, so at the commandment of the captain, they removed straightways from thence and came near unto them at the town of Desar. Now Simon, Judas's brother, had joined battle with Nicanor, but was somewhat discomfited through the sudden silence of his enemies, right? So as we was reading before in the previous chapters, how when Judas sent his forces out, he sent one force out with Simon, sent another one out with his brother Jonathan, he sent another one out with a brother Joseph, and it was in different bands, right? Different companies of bands that went out and fight. So now as Nicanor is drawing close, Simon is now about to gauge into the battle, but it says that he was discomfited through it says that he was discomfited through the sudden silence of his enemies, as if they had now just stopped or withdrawn themselves, right? So now it perplexed him. He didn't understand what was going on. It says in verse 18, nevertheless, Nicanor, hearing of the manliness of them that were with Judas and the courageousness that they had to fight for their country, durst not try the matter by sword. So now we understand Nicanor was kind of using a little bit more tactic. He said, listen, I'm not going to come and fight hand-to-hand combat with him because I've already seen what he's done to me previously and what he's done to others, right? So we gotta approach this in a different manner. This is what they do sometimes when you see people on the news. They said we're going to use diplomacy, right? Diplomacy means you're just going to sit down and try to see if you can work things out face-to-face with words without really needing to lose any lives. So he was going to try to be a little bit more diplomatic about this situation, right? It says, verse 19, wherefore he sent Posidonius and Theodoctus and Mattathias to make peace, right? So this is where they have peace agreements, peace talks. A lot of the things that we see today ain't new. They've happened in the past, right? Peace agreements and false peace agreements and these things were done in the past, right? It's just a front either to delay the inevitable, or if you are at a disadvantage, you try to make these agreements until you are more powerful, capable, and ready in order to go and now do your own enterprise, right? So now, reading on, it says in verse 20, so when they had taken long advisement thereupon, and the captain had made the multitude acquainted therewith, and it appeared that they were all of one mind, they consented to the covenants. So they was able to sit down and come to some kind of agreement, right? We're not going to come in and invade your land. Well, we're not going to go and kill any of the heathen. We're not going to do anything to anybody. Let them stay over here. Sure, we're still here. We'll make a border. We'll make a line of demarcation that says we can't go. They did all of that. And they said we came to an agreement with one consent and said this is what's going to be the peace agreement, right? It says in verse 21, and appointed a day to meet in together by themselves. And when they came, and when the day came and stools were set for either of them, Judas placed armed men ready in convenient places, lest some treachery should be suddenly practiced by the enemies. So they made a peaceable conference, right? So, Judas and them was a little bit, reluctant because they didn't trust him. So he had people in certain areas, people over here, people over there. And when they realized that everything was kosher, meaning that there was not going to be anything that was going to put them in harm's way, they went and sat down. They put a stool here and a stool there for them to have a face-to-face confrontation and to have a peaceable conference, right? No one was going to have the upper hand. So this is kind of like, ancient way of doing it. You have a stool here and a stool there because you out in the field of battle. You're not in the palace, so you're not in some convention center or whatever the case may be. You out in the field of war. So this is what they did. So now reading on, it says in verse 23, now Nicanor abode in Jerusalem and did no hurt, but sent away the people that came flocking unto him, right? So after a while, Nicanor, when he got there in front of Judas and he had these conversations, remembering that he said he didn't want to confront them with sword or get into a physical fight, he sent some of his people away. Those that had came to him of the heathen, because most times when the heathen come with those who are soldiers or armies of their nations, they're thinking that they're about to get slaves. He sent them away. Nah, this ain't that. Y'all got to go. Go home. Leave me alone. So I got this. We good. There's no problem. So he sent them alone. And now they're just sitting there in Jerusalem, abiding, dwelling with them. with peace, right? We're not the wicked ones, right? Judas, if we was that, it would have been times where they would have taken them and murdered them themselves. But they didn't do that, as we're about to read, right? Reading it again, it says, verse 23, now Nicanor abode in Jerusalem and did no hurt, but sent away the people that came flocking unto him. And he would not willingly have Judas out of his sight, for he loved the man from his heart, meaning he respected this man, Judas Maccabees, right? Again, times we know throughout history that there are times when people who are warriors or soldiers, usually others will respect them for what they are. You might be your enemy, but you cannot deny that there's certain individuals who have a valiant heart, right? There's not a lot of those people in the world who are on a high level, who protect their nation and their people, and who are very successful at a high level. So this man Nicanor respected him, but also keep in mind that this man also had a higher power with him, which is our almighty power. So Nicanor, this is not like a love, like how you see, love in this. This is like a love as far as for this man is a respected man, right? This man is a warrior. So he kind of let his guard down and had some type of, desire to always want to be in his presence. Let me feed off of his energy. Let me see how he moves. That's like how we do with so-called celebrities or what do they call them? Idols, like American Idol and all that. You view people where you go to a concert or you go to a club or a party. And I remember when I used to go and do that, everybody just be standing there looking at them. Nobody's dancing, nobody's partying. You just standing there looking at the person. I want to see how he move. I want to see what he drink, how he walk, how he sit. Do they go to the bath? Like if these individuals ain't regular men or women, right? So this is why it says he didn't want to have him out of his sight. He wanted to see everything about this man because he respected him on a high level, right? So now once you have that, you want to see what makes this man tick, right? After a while, you forget your own purpose. You forget why your whole reason of being there was for, because you want another agenda of trying to learn this man, right? It says in verse 25, he prayed him also to take a wife and to beget children. So he married, was quiet, and took part of this life. Just like, yo, man, we're not at odds. You should relax. You should go live your life. Go get a family, right? And now he's dwelling there. Remember, this man was set up to be governor of Judea. So he's in the land. He's in this place as the governor, right? And then as he's there, he's now absorbing and getting comfortable in this land. But his still purpose was to take that man out, that one man out. So now he's looking at and seeing how things are set up. He's seeing the temple. He's seeing a whole bunch of different things, right? And he's letting his desire to learn about this man and everything else blind his objective, right? Verse 26. But alchemists, perceiving the love that was betwixt them, and considering the covenants that were made, came to Demetrius and told him that Nicanor was not well affected toward the state, for that he had ordained Judas, a traitor to his realm, to be the king's successor, right? So while all this time is going on, alchemists were supposed to be set up to be high priests. So he's peeping what's going on. So now he comes back to Demetrius and like, yo, I think your boy over here, he's slacking, right? He's supposed to be taking this man out. He's over here making peace agreements and doing other things. I don't think he has the state in mind. The state meaning as far as for the state of affairs that the Greeks had now put upon him to now protect their realm. He doesn't have that in mind. So I think we gotta urge him on or replace him or do something. So he's now trying to urge the matter on with Demetrius as far as for what this man Nicanor is a little slothful in doing. Verse 27. Then the king, being in a rage and provoked with the accusations of the most wicked man, wrote to Nicanor, signifying that he was much displeased with the covenants and commanding him that he should send Maccabeus prisoner in all haste unto Antioch. So as Alchemist is now, muddying the waters with Nicanor as far as for what he's doing there, it's getting Demetrius even more and more upset, right? It's getting him more and more enraged because he's hearing about agreements that they hadn't made, that he's making on behalf of them. So now what happens? You got to go and send a letter with the king's seal on it and say, listen, either you're going to get this thing done or else. Matter of fact, you need to bring that man prisoner quick, fast, in a hurry back here to Antioch, right? It wasn't even that they wanted to kill him. Now it's like, listen, you got to bring him. I want to see his face. Bring him back here to Antioch. Verse 28. When this came to Nicanor's hearing, he was much confounded in himself and took it grievously that he should make void the articles which were agreed upon, the man being in no fault. So this is almost like when you read about in the gospel with Yahushua, when Pontius Pilate said, I'll find no fault in this man, speaking about Yahushua before he was to be crucified, right? I don't find no fault in this man. He did nothing wrong. But again, as it pertains to the state of affairs for the realm, right? You can't have someone who goes against the authority of the king still be allowed to do any old thing that he wants to do. Even within our own kingdom, you can't have Israel being set up and we have all our laws and then a heathen comes in and says, that's cool, but I want to do what I want to do. That doesn't go down like that, right? You can't have that type of sedition. You can't have that type of rebelliousness within your realm because, as we know, a little leaven up the lump. So if we allow that man to do it, then this man going to do it. So as we wouldn't allow anyone to come into our realm to do this, this is the same thing that the heathen is thinking. We can't have this man running rampant like he is. He got to be dealt with. Nicanor is like, damn, I done made some agreements, put my word on the line. I done said this, such and such. Now I got to go back on that. And now I got to go and take this man down. I don't see nothing wrong with him. This guy's a good guy, right? He a good guy to me. I'm governor of the land, ain't nothing going, everything is cool. But now that's not what the purpose was for this man to live. It was for him to be either taken hostage or for him to be killed. So it says in verse 29, but because there was no dealing against the king, he watched his time to accomplish this thing by policy, right? So there was a still place. He wasn't back there in Antioch. So now he has to reconsider his whole objective. He got to rethink everything and how he's going to do this thing by policy. Because again, that's what Esau likes to do. They like to literally try to fight without fighting, right? Let's see if I can win this or do this through policy and words and agreements until I can now get the upper hand. So he had to take time to think about these things.
You might have referenced it earlier, but Christ gave a parable about this as far as the importance of asking, how many in situations like this.
Mm-hmm.
But in Luke 14 and 31, in Luke 14 and 31, it says, or what king going to make war against another king sitteth not down first, and consulted whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000. 32, or else while the others yet a great way off, he standeth in ambassage and desire conditions of peace.
Mm-hmm. Kun. And to go along with that, that was Luke 14, 31 to what? 32?
Yeah.
And then also Daniel's chapter 8, right? Because it talks about him trying to do this thing through policy. This is Daniel's chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 24. Actually, I'm going to start at 21 to kind of give you insight as to who this is talking about. And then I'm going to jump down to 24. So Daniel chapter 8 and verse 21. It says, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, right? So this is talking about the Greek Empire and its beginnings. And then it says the horn that's between his eyes is Greek's first king, who was who? Alexander the Great, right? He was that first king that came up and ruled during the times of the Greeks. But now as you read, it's going to talk about that same type kingdom, that same people in the latter days, right? In the latter days. I'm just going to keep reading. Verse 22, now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, four kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in its power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, right? So in this latter days, right, when the transgressions are come to the full, meaning it's gotten to this wickedest height. I seen I don't know, Elder Zaquan posted on there as far as for the law that was passed in Canada about a person can sleep with their animal or perform oral sex on an animal or something like that. That was from 2016, right? So we was talking about, this thing going to become like the new thing. It had already started, right? So now when you look at this, you start saying, this is going too far, right? This is going to be above and beyond wickedness that I thought I would see in my lifetime. Well, we already here. So that's what it's talking about when it says the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance. So when people read the Bible, they don't realize that sometimes you got to look at context. This king ain't talking about one king. It's talking about a nation or a kingdom that's going to come up in the last days. It tells you about that in the book of Revelations, that a king can be synonymous with the kingdom, right? So this kingdom was going to be the one that was going to come with fierce countenance. It says, and understanding dark sentences shall stand up, right? They deal with a lot of things on the left-hand side, as well as observing certain signs of the times of things that's going on. That's what this last kingdom has been doing. It doesn't stop there. It says, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. So when you read it in the Revelations, it says that the beast got his power and strength from Satan, right? Satan was the one that's behind the beast. So it says, and he shall destroy wonderfully. That's why when it comes down to certain decisions that's made globally, who makes the last call or the first call? It's always the same kingdom that's ruling the world. It says, and shall prosper and practice and shall destroy the mighty and holy people. This is where the march came from 2 years ago. This is where all the marches, this is where they're saying, I'm tired of being tired, because we are the ones that's being destroyed like no other. Now, this is the verse that I wanted to get to, verse 25. And through his policy, also, he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand. That's what we're reading about with Nicanor now. He was talking about doing it through policy. Policy don't always work. Policy sometimes work. But this is what they have been doing throughout the different empires of their state, or the stages of their empire, using policy, talking about sanctions and embargoes and tariffs and all of these things is just a way to now continue to control the world with words, right? With sanctions, with things, without having to now get into a physical conflict.
Yeah, many crafts, right? Because you have, in this case, we have statecraft, spycraft, right?
Mm-hmm.
These guys do both. Not to mention, usually think of craft, think of witchcraft automatically, but there's other crafts.
There's other crafts, you're right. It says, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. And he shall stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Prince of princes being Yahweh Shah. He's even going to stand up against the Messiah in the last days. Remember, this said this is the latter time about this Greek kingdom that's going to now split off into four kingdoms and be the one standing in the last days. This is the same thing that we're reading from the beginnings of their empire here in the Maccabees. This is why history sometimes is important, to now correlate this with the Bible, to make sense of these things. All right, so let's go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 14. So we have 14 and we have verse 30.
Verse 25 in Daniel 8. Can we parallel that to Antiochus?
As far as for
being broken without hand.
Kun. As far as for there's times where you may not have to lift sword or anything in order for a person to be destroyed. Like the Most High throughout the scripture, sometimes he can plague you, right? He can have all different kind of things happen to you without you now entering into an actual conflict, right? That's what it's talking about as far as for being broken without hand. But it starts off with the words, the word of the Most High. We're breaking them right now without hand. We're breaking down Babylon. Babylon is being broken down through the spirit of the words of the Most High being preached throughout the four corners of the earth. Because again, the narrative is what allows them or keeps them sustaining themselves. When you break down a narrative and bring truth in, then everything begins to fall and crumble, right? And then we begin to stand up and realize who we are and not accept the lies from what we've been reading before. That's the key, right? That's the awakening, right? Awake thou that sleepest, right? Christ shall give you light. Once we receive that light, then we're the ones that now will stand and prosper in these last days. All right. 2 Maccabees chapter 14, verse 30. Notwithstanding, when Maccabeus saw that Nicanor began to be churlish unto him, and that he entreated him more roughly than he was wont, perceiving that such sour behavior came not of good, he gathered together not of a few of his men and withdrew himself from Nicanor. So that shows you at the time while Nicanor was there all this while, that they was comfortable around each other. But now once Nicanor received that letter and the king was upset, he had to now begin to change focus. And now in doing so, policy probably wasn't working and he began to be a little bit more rough, right? His energy changed. And Judas picked up on it and said, I can't be around this guy anymore. And now he separated himself and took men with him to protect himself, right? It says, verse 31, but the other, knowing that he was notably prevented by Judas's policy, came into the great and holy temple and commanded the priests that were offering their usual offerings to deliver him the man. So now Judas wasn't now accessible to him, and it began to get him more infuriated, right? Judas figured things out and separated himself. So now that he could not easily apprehend Judas, he now went to go and find some people that was going to have the care of Judas or the people and say, listen, you guys bring me this man. So he went into the holy temple and went to the priest demanding that they give him this. You usually see that in movies, or you see that sometimes where you might have the villain and the villain is heartless, but the hero cares for everybody, right? So when the villain is kind of losing his strength or losing his grip, what do? They go and grab an innocent bystander and say, I'm going to go and kill him or her unless you give me what I want. So it's as if now if I go into the temple of the Most High, I'm going to now threaten them to have this man being given up, because I know how much they love the temple and how much they love the people and all these different things. So threats are now going to start being hurled out, right? So reading it again, it says, verse 31, but the other, which is Nicanor, knowing that he was notably prevented by Judas's policy, came into the great and holy temple and commanded the priests that were offering their usual sacrifices to deliver him the man. And when they swear that they could not tell where the man was whom he sought, he stretched out his right hand toward the temple and made an oath in this manner. If you will not deliver me, Judas, as a prisoner, I will lay this temple of God even with the ground, and I will break down the altar and erect a notable temple unto Bacchus, right? So he sent out an oath that he was going to go and destroy the temple of the Most High if they would not go and find this man Judas. Now, when he first mentioned it to him, they ain't know where Judas was. So they weren't lying. It wasn't like they can deliver him up. But at the same time, still, the Most High was going to allow Judas to not be in any position where he was going to be taken at that time, because it wasn't of the Most High's will. So now when this happened, the Most High now most likely incensed the pride in this man, where he now threatened the Most High's temple. I'm going to lay it down to the ground, and at the foundation of it, I'm going to erect another temple unto Bacchus, right? We read about them having a feast unto Bacchus during the time of Eleazar, a father of the people, who did not succumb to their policies and succumb to their wit, as far as for now trying to make Israel defile themselves. So this is what now we're being faced. Now threats is now being made again to the nation, to our temple, and to our people. It says in verse 34, after these words, he departed. And then the priests lifted up their hands toward heaven and besought him that was ever their defender. So in a time of trouble, in a time of despair, in a time of lost hope, what do? We go and pray to the Most High, right? That's the first thing, right? This wasn't the second thing or the last thing. It was always the first thing that we should do. When you read 1 Timothy 2:8, it says, I will therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting, right? So we should always be continually praying, especially in a time of despair, in a time of disaster or destruction of the nation, in a time of war. We always want to come and pray to the Most High, especially in times like this. So it says in verse 35, verse 35 says, thou, O Lord of all things, who has need of nothing, was pleased that the temple of thine habitation should be among us, right? So this goes back to what we read when it comes to the temple or the tabernacle. The tabernacle started off with Moses and Aaron when we came as a nation, right? Coming out of Egypt. Then it went to us creating a temple, during the time of King Solomon. When you read in 1 Kings, the 8th chapter, when Solomon dedicated the temple. Then you'll read about this during the time of Ezra, when the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. They went and rebuilt it, right? So now this is where the temple has now continued on up until right now that we're reading about during the time of the Maccabees, right? And then the last time you'll read about during the time of Herod, when Herod began to, beef up the temple, right? Add unto it and make it a little bit more glorious because he was tetrarch of Judea at that time. Then after that, during the time of 70 AD, the temple was destroyed. But here it was still standing, right? So they realized that the Most High was pleased. He accepted the dedication of the temple from those men. It says, verse 36, therefore now, O Lord, Salak, O holy Lord of all holiness, keep this house ever undefiled, which lately was cleansed, and stop every unrighteous mouth, right? So when it says it was lately cleansed, what is that talking about? That's talking about just not too long ago, we went and rededicated the altar during the feast of the dedication, or Hanukkah. So it was just cleansed. We removed all of the filth of the heathen as far as for the harlots and as far as for the unclean animals that was sacrificed on the altar. Please come help us defend our temple. Verse 37. Now, was there accused unto Nicanor one Razes, one of the elders of Jerusalem, a lover of his countrymen, and a man of a very good report, who for his kindness was called a father of the Jews, right? So now, here it is, you got this man at the time when the heathen is coming in, and you already had Alchemist, who was a wicked man that was set up to be high priest. They're now looking to go and get all the Assyrians or anyone who was causing the tumult to now stop them from now keeping the Gentiles or the Greek enterprise. So they found this guy to make an example of him because he was a man of well report. He was a man that was considered to be a father of the people, right? So now when you have people who are of age, stature, or experience in righteousness, you consider them to be a father figure, right? You can write down 1 Timothy. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 1. Kahamana Shah, if you can read that. 1 Timothy chapter 5 and verse 1.
1 Timothy 5:1. Rebuke not an elder, but instead him as a father, and the younger man as brethren.
Right. So it says, rebuke not an elder. So there are going to be men that's going to be in this truth, in this walk, right, who are going to be elevated above certain people, right, who have to care of the brethren. Don't rebuke him. They mean that don't make quick railing accusations over him because you may not agree with some of the manner in which he's going to do certain things. There has to be order within the nation. Then it says to treat him as a father, right? So you now look at him like your father, like your spiritual father, not your physical or your paternal father on earth, but as your spiritual father who's now looking over you as a son to a father, right? Now, go to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. And verse 10.
1 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 10. He are witnesses, and God also how holily and justly and unblameably we behave ourselves among you that believe.
Right. So this is Paul speaking to the church, letting them know that, look, the manner in which we had care for you, you guys are witnesses, right? How holy, justly, and unblameable we behaved ourselves. And that's how everybody should be. Every person who is now looking to now preside or be a counselor, be a person who's now bringing somebody up or ringing up in the spirit, you have to have your character that's now going to exhibit holiness, justice, and be unblameable. They can't bring any accusation against you for doing certain things, right? This is how we're supposed to be. But now read on.
Love it. As he know how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you as a father do his children.
Right. So the same manner a father does with the children, this is how we dealt with y'all. Right? The same way how we have care of our own sons, we now have care over y'all. So this is what this man Razes was. Razes was a person who was holy, just, and unblameable to the people. So this is why they wanted to use him to make an example out of him, what we're reading here in 2 Maccabees, because he exhibited these qualities. You had a lot of men in the past that exhibited these qualities. We hope to exhibit these same qualities to continue on in these last days before Yahushua comes, right? So now let's go back to 2 Maccabees, chapter 14. And we have verse 37 again. Come.
Like Yahushua will always do, where most of will give us something good, but of course, as we fell from the way, that things become corrupt. We give too much credit. Christ said this, you read in Matthew 23. Matthew 23 and 9. Where it says, this is him talking about the Pharisee and the Sadducee, right? He says, "Behold, in your Father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is," in the book that goes into like then pointing to the rabbi, which comes from the Hebrew, I think it's Rahab or Ram, which is like the highest, I think, something like that, the high one.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, it's like it only was made wicked because we did it, and then the spirit in it was messed up. So it's like Christ's kingdom was like, look, let me call him Master, let me call him Father. Right? We got one Father, we got one Son.
Fine. So verse 37, it said, now there was accused unto Nicanor one Razes, one of the elders of Jerusalem, a lover of his countrymen, and a man of very good report, who for his kindness was called the father of the Jews. For in the former times, when they mingled not themselves with the Gentiles, he had been accused of Judaism, right? And when you read Judaism here, it's not the same Judaism as it is as far as for the today's religion, right? Yeah, following after the Talmud and other books. Judaism here is really just dealing with the practice of keeping the Most High's statutes, commandments, and laws, right? It's not the same. Same thing when you're reading the Bible and it talks about religion, right? Religion is just dealing with your principles, the righteous principles that the Most High has given you. So sometimes Esau takes certain things for themselves and changes it around and corrupts it. But when you read it based on context, it's just dealing with the practices of keeping the Most High's law as well as his principles. So it says, accused of Judaism and did boldly jeopard his body and life with all vehemency for the religion of the Jews. The religion of the Jews, again, is that law. It says,
James chapter 1.
21, 22,
26.
27, cut.
He says, folks that can't be like me. Oh, I want to get into religion. I'm not into religion. We're not into religion either, brother.
Right.
Well, what about that verse? So then you read the verse, it explains itself, what you already said. The religion actually talking about.
Mm-hmm.
James chapter 1 verse 26, it says, if any man among you seem to be religious and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is vain. And it says in verse 27, pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction and keep himself unspotted from the world. Which if you're going to visit the fathers and the widows, that's just in the laws of Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going right back to the law and say, if you're dealing with a true religion, you're going to be following God systematically. It better be according to the law.
Okay. All right. So back in Second Maccabees, chapter 14, and we at verse 39. It says, so Nicanor, willing to declare the hate that he bare unto the Jews, sent above 500 men of war to take him. For he thought by taking him to do the Jews much hurt. It's just like we said before, sometimes in order to get what you want, you go and take a innocent victim, right? Take something take someone that people esteem that has probably nothing to do with the situation. So that's what he said. I'm going to take this guy with the intention of doing them much hurt, right? That they would possibly deliver up Judas because this guy really has nothing to do with it. It says, now when the multitude would have taken the tower and violently broken into the outer door and bade that fire should be brought to burn it, he being ready to be taken on every side fell upon his sword. So now when they was looking to go and make an example of him and to take him, but now threatening to burn the tower and do all types of things, he said, you know what? They after me. I'm going to fall upon my sword. I'd rather fall upon my sword than for this calamity to continue happening, right? Sometimes people look at, when you read it, and I think it's Wisdom of Solomon, the first chapter, that you should not look to seek death in the era of your life, right? But this isn't the era of his life. He realized what they was trying to do. They was trying to use him as an example, right? They was trying to, you see that sometimes in war, when they want to take someone who's of a high esteem, they'll make mockery. They'll take him captive, prostrate him through the city, people throwing things on him, spitting on him, making him feel like less than anything. And he didn't want to have that happen to him, right? Because he knew what the Greeks was going to do to the Jews. He knew what types of things they was going to do. So he figured it'd be better if he just fall upon his sword and take his own life and then come back in the regeneration and get revenge, right? So to read it again, it says, now when the multitude would have taken the tower and violently broken into the outer door and bade that fire should be brought to burn it, he being ready to be taken on every side fell upon his sword, choosing rather to die manfully than to come into the hands of the wicked, to be abused otherwise than beseemed his noble birth, right? So he didn't want to have his acts, his righteousness be made a mockery of, or to be put prostrated like that by the heathen. So he figured he'd just go and die on his sword manfully than be put into the hands of the heathen. Verse 43, but missing his stroke through haste, the multitude also rushing within the doors, he ran boldly up to the wall and cast himself down manfully among the thickets of them. So he's in the tower and they're trying to get to him. And he's saying, listen, I'm going to go kill myself, but they coming. So as he's now trying to go and do it, he missed the mark. He wounded himself, but he missed the mark that now will cause a mortal wound. So now he still don't want to fall in hand. So he runs to the tower and then says he casts himself down manfully upon the thickest of them. Because remember, he's in the tower. So now you have some of the heathen that's outside the tower. So he runs upon the wall and then jumps out to now dive on top of them, thinking that by doing that, he would die than to be captured, right? It says, but they quickly give him back, and a space being made, he fell down into the midst of the void place. That's like when you see people at concerts, they go and do the mosh pit, right? They on stage and they run and they jump, and the people are supposed to catch him and they pass him around, right? But that didn't happen in this case. He would have thought that they would have had swords up to kill him and he would have died. But when they seen him coming, they all stepped back and left an open space there, and he fell down and hit himself on the ground, right? So now he wounded himself with the sword and he missed the mark, and now he's fallen on the ground before everyone is separated. So now he's really jacked up. Verse 45, nevertheless, while there was yet breath within him, so he didn't die, right? You would have thought that, that would have caused him to be knocked out or unconscious, whatever. Nah, he still had breath and he still was up. Being inflamed with anger, he rose up. And though his blood gushed out like spouts of water and his wounds were grievous. So now he was really messed up. His blood is just coming out, right? Wounds is almost to that point, but it's not there yet. But, sometimes when you're so angry, the adrenaline is taking over. Well, you might not be feeling those things. It says, yet he ran through the midst of the throng and standing upon a steep rock. When as his blood was now quite gone, he plucked out his bowels and taking them in both his hands, he cast them upon the throng and calling upon the Lord of life and spirit to restore him those again. Thus, Salak, he thus died. So now as he's jacked up, he's wounded, he's running through the throngs of them trying to get to him. He takes out his guts, right? And then he casts himself upon them, now praying to the Most High that he would then give him that victory later on, because that's what it says, that calling upon the Lord of life and spirit to restore him those again, his life and his spirit, that he would get that back, knowing that he was about to die. So this goes into what we were talking about in the Friday class. We knew that there was a time when we would get regenerated, right? The Most High would grant you to get regenerated, and later on in another life, you would then be able to come back and get revenge, right? Most High's will, that brother Razzies is here again today. Razzies will be here again today in these last days to get just that, to get that prayer that he just prayed, that he would get his life restored again, and then he can get revenge. Remember, it tells you in Revelations 13, 9, and 10, the last part, this is the faith and patience of the saints, right? We got to have that faith and patience in these last days to fulfill the Lord's will, his judgment. We at the brink of it. We just got to be patient, and the Most High will fulfill it, but we have to be disciplined and continue in these righteous acts. All right. Now, chapter 15. Oh, Salah.
42. You can just write down as far as the why he did it, why he wanted to take his life. That it wasn't, what you said, it wasn't Solomon. 1 Samuel.
31.
Yeah. I'm just going to read verse 4. We read 1 to 6 of the whole story, but I'll just read verse 4. 1 Samuel 31, in verse 4 reads, Then said Saul unto his armor bearer, draw thy sword and thrust me through therewith, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and abuse me. His armor bearer would not, for he was so afraid. Therefore Saul took his sword and fell upon him. And then you got Ammon, the so-called Japanese, and then samurai. They have a thing, I think it's called seppuku. I'm not sure I'm saying the word right. That's like, it has a similar place as far as what we do, where if they lost in battle, like it says in First Maccabees 14:24, as befitting his honor, to maintain their honor, they would cut along the midsection after they were surrounded by the enemy. And that movie with Tom Cruise, and it actually shows that. And then you see Ken Watanabe's character, the old man kills himself. He cuts himself afterwards. You see both kind of tears because it's like they understand what it's about. You know how it works. So it's it's something from those things.
Okay, so this is 2 Maccabees chapter 15 and verse 1. It says, but Nicanor, hearing that Judas and his company were in the strong places about Samaria, resolved without any danger to set upon them on the Sabbath day, right? So we had read during the times of the storyline of the rededication of the altar, what happened to certain men when the heathen came to fight against them on the Sabbath day, how they chose not to fight, and they were all murdered. And then afterwards, Mattathias and the rest of them realized that if they kept that same thought, that the heathen would always come on the Sabbath day and kill us all. So they began to fight on the Sabbath day to defend themselves. So this day, now here it is, Nicanor is also coming to try to fight on the Sabbath day, the seventh day or the day of rest, where we come to worship the Most High. Remember, this is a tactic. You got to know your enemy. You got to know their strengths and their weaknesses. So they looked at this as a weakness of our people that we go and worship on that day. We wouldn't want to go and deal with conflict and fight. Verse 2, nevertheless, the Jews that were compelled to go with him said, oh, destroy not so cruelly and barbarously, but give honor to that day, which he that seeth all things hath honored with wholeness above other days. So don't look to come on this day. Like, come on, man. Like, you know, this is a day of rest. You know, this is a day where we look to come to fight. There should be agreements where we don't fight on these days. We don't engage on these days. That's like how they just had the ceasefire, right? We're gonna do a ceasefire right now. Let the innocent people that's within the city, let them leave and get out of the country, man. Let's choose an hour or 4 hours so they can all get. And he said, all right, cool. And then halfway through, man, forget that ceasefire. And they went in while the guard was down to go and start re-engaging in war. That shows you that peace agreements don't sit well with this nation of people, right? So this is what they were now petitioning, that the Most High has set the seventh day aside from other days. Let's honor that. Verse 3, then the most ungracious wretch demanded, if there were a mighty one in heaven that had commanded the Sabbath day to be kept, right? So he's like, where he at? That's how you have some people say today. If there is a God, let him show himself. Call upon him. Make him do something, right? But the Most High is smart. He's waiting some of these individuals out, whether they are the other nations or even within Israel, because that time when he does show himself, he's going to do and execute what he talks about in Proverbs, the first chapter. He's going to laugh at them when their calamity comes. He's going to do all those things that he prophesied about because they did not want to take counsel or they didn't want to take correction. They didn't want to believe when the story or the history was given to them. They looked at it for naught, right? And the Most High then is going to execute his judgment. So now here it is. This heathen man is also now saying this stuff. Where he at, right? It says in verse 4, and when they said, there is in heaven a living Lord and mighty who commanded the seventh day to be kept, then said the other, and I also am mighty upon earth, and I command to take arms and to do the king's business. yet he obtained not to have his wicked will done, right? So pride entered into this man and saying that he was like a god. I call people to come and fight and go there and such and such. I'm the one that's been set up to do the king's will. So now, as you've seen throughout other times before, even in First Maccabees with King Antiochus, Epiphanes, right? God manifests on earth. He had that same mind state, right? You can go throughout different empires, even going back to the Egyptians, you can go to the Babylonians. All of them had this type complex where they wanted to be revered as being a god, but they were just men, right? They were just men who, at a thrust of a sword or of a pestilence, they would die and none could save them. So this is that same spirit that he now had upon him, right? It says in verse 6, so Nicanor, in exceeding pride and haughtiness, determined to set up a public monument of his victory over Judas and them that were with him. We see that this is a thing with the Edomites. They love to set up all different types of monuments and statutes and things of themselves and in victory. That's where you go when they was talking about the pulling down of these people, when it was like, yeah, these were Confederate folks. They started pulling down monuments throughout Philly and different cities and states throughout the country, because that's the thing that they love to do. We didn't do that, right? You didn't see us always setting up monuments where they found the bust or the statue of this man or that man. Moses had a statue. David had his. We didn't do that. We were not as vain as the rest of these nations were, especially Esau. No one is as vain as Esau in the standing up of different statues and monuments, right? They have them all flooded throughout the city, all throughout the museums and everything, even for their false gods and actual human beings. That's what they do. So he wanted to do the same thing. Verse 7, but Maccabeus had ever sure confidence that the Lord would help him. I'm going to read it again. But Maccabeus had ever sure confidence that Yahweh would help him. That's where we got to be. Like we was reading in 1 Timothy when it talks about that men pray, not doubting, right? You can't doubt that the Most High is going to be there to defend you when the time comes for him to come and help. We got to have that no fear type of mentality that the Most High is going to be there because we do his will. That's what it says in 1 John, 3rd chapter. 1 John, the 3rd chapter and the 22nd verse. It says, and whatsoever we ask, we receive of him because we keep his commandments and do those things that are pleasing in his sight. So that's why he was so sure, because he was a righteous man. He was one that was standing up for the laws and commandments. So as he was now about to enter into this engagement, he knew that the Most High was going to be there for him, right? Ever sure confidence. It says, verse 8, wherefore he exhorted his people not to fear the coming of the heathen against them, but to remember the help which in former times they had received from heaven, and now to expect the victory and aid which should come unto them from the Almighty. So this wasn't the first time Judas and them got into a conflict or fought a war. The Most High has been there many times for Judas, not for just for David, not just for during the times when Sennacherib and the Assyrians came, not just during the times of the Egyptians, a whole lot of times, even in their own lifetime. When you read in 2 Maccabees, I believe it's in 2 Maccabees, when they entered into a conflict, the Most High sent the angels, and the angels came. And the angels came down literally and lifted Judas up and protected him from the war. And they went out and fought against the enemy. That's why he had that sure confidence, because the Most High had already sent angels down to protect him and to fight for him. So now he had to take that same confidence and exhort the rest of the people that was with him. There's going to be times where some of us going to need to be exhorted. Some of us going to need to be reminded of the Most High. Some of us going to use that text message, that phone call, could probably physically show up here because you're afraid. And you need that exhortation from the kings, from the brothers, to now build you back up, to let you know that you're not in this thing alone. They ain't it alone. They don't have the Most High like we have the Most High. So we got to be reminded of how the Most High can help us and how he will help us in these last days, right? it says, verse 9, and so comforting them out of the law and the prophets, and withal putting them in mind of the battles that they won afore, he made them more cheerful. So he went back into these stories, right? So they had time for him to bring back up all these different wars from their lifetime and from the other ones, so that they would then be able to now be a little bit more cheerful of what was now about to embark on, because they needed to be in the right spirit. Because if you're not in the right spirit, the scripture has it where in the law, if you are fearful, you got to bounce, you got to leave, you got to go back home, right? I think that's in Deuteronomy. I forget the chapter, where those who are fearful, who had wives, who just got a house or whatever, if you not in the right spirit, you leave and you go back home, right? So now reading on verse 10, it says, and when they had stirred up their minds, and when he had stirred up their minds, he gave them their charge, showing them therewithal the falsehood of the heathen and the breach of oaths, right? Showing them that everything that they be talking about, all the things they deal with, is lies and falsehoods. They do not keep their agreements. They don't keep their covenants. And it's been something that's been consistent with them as a people. So we can't never let our guard down, because that's what they try to do and come and say, everybody ain't the same. Everybody not all like that, right? But I like what, I think it was, I don't know if it was Malcolm X. I think it was Malcolm X. And he was talking about, and he made reference of a snake, right? And if he said, if a snake bites you one time, and you go into an area, there's a snake again, and other snakes there again, you're just going to go in there and walk in there? He said, nah, because you are fearful of what the snake, you know what temperament the snake can have to bite you again. So why would you put yourself in that situation, right? It always, the scripture, Most High tells you to flee from wickedness, or flee from evil, flee from sin, right? You don't want to be like, what is it, like Elam? They want to be snake charmers and playing with the snake and doing all different kind of things with the snake, right? Showing that they can have control over the snake. But the Most High could, like that, put the spirit on those animals and they jack them up. And we've seen that happen. They want to be lion tamers and being at one with them. And all of a sudden, when they strike, it's too late. And they say, well, why did the animal do that? Because it went back to his nature. And or the Most High put the spirit on them to kill or harm those individuals. Verse 11, thus he armed every one of them, not so much with defense of shields and spears, as with comfortable and good words. And beside that, he told them a dream worthy to believe, as if they had been so indeed, which did not a little rejoice them. So it's the same thing that we read back in 2 Maccabees, the 8th chapter. Go back to 2 Maccabees, the 8th chapter, and the 18th verse, as far as for him arming every one of them with not so much of defense of shields and spears. So they were all armed. How were they armed? So 2 Maccabees chapter 8 and verse 18. Manashah, was that read, Baba Kushah?
2 Maccabees 8:18. For they, said he, trust in their weapon and boldness, but our confidence is in the Almighty God, who at a beck can cast down both them that come against us and also all the world.
Right. So it says they trust in their weapons. They trust in their guns. They trust in their swords. They trust in their numbers. But we don't trust in that. We trust in the Most High, right? That's the same thing that happens today, right? Most people trust in weapons, technology, right? Where they don't realize that there's a superpower that's up there that fights. And he can all of a sudden make every weapon jam, make all the power or electricity or whatever is needed to fail. Then what you going to do, right? People talking about right now, they're worrying about cyber attacks coming, which will shut down the whole power grid. What are you going to do, right? What can you do when you're defenseless, when the technologies and things that you use in order to fight are not available to you, right? So we now have the Most High that can now aid us in those things, aid us to overcome those times. So we don't put trust in weapons, even though we had weapons, even though they had shields and swords and things, but they didn't put their ultimate trust in it. The trust was in the Most High. So this is what Judas Maccabees is doing to exhortate them, to inspire them, to give them courage to now go and fight against Nicanor another time, right? So back in 2 Maccabees chapter 15 and verse 12. And this was the dream, right? Because it said that he told them a dream worthy to be believed as if it had been so indeed. So now this is the dream of the vision that he had given them. It said that Onias, who had been high priest, a virtuous and a good man, reverent in conversation, gentle in condition, well-spoken, and exercised from a child in all points of virtue, holding up his hands, prayed for the whole body of the Jews. This done, in like manner, there appeared a man with gray hairs, and exceeding glorious, who was of a wonderful and excellent majesty. Then Onias answered, saying, this is a lover of the brethren, who prayeth much for the people and for the holy city, to wit, Jeremiah, the prophet of Yahweh. Whereupon Jeremiah, holding forth his right hand, gave to Judas a sword of gold, and in giving it spake thus, take this holy sword, a gift from God or Yahweh, with the which thou shalt wound the adversaries. So now they use this righteous man, this priest Onias, and saying in the dream, he sent up prayers, and Jeremiah that you read about in the book of Jeremiah from the times of the kings when we went into the Babylonian Empire, he had now come back to now symbolically give the sword from the Most High God that he's going to use to go and strike down Nicanor and the nations, right? Knowing that in times past, the Most High does send us dreams and visions about what is going to happen. Many prophets in the past were sent visions, and then they had to go to the people and expound on the vision or the dream given to them by the Most High. So this was another account of this type vision that he was supposed to have allegedly received. So now it's to do what? Build courage in the people, because as we read before, there was a little bit afraid because Nicanor was coming and the onslaught that he was going to do to the Jews. So it says in verse 17, thus being well comforted by the words of Judas, which were very good and able to stir them up to valor and to encourage the hearts of the young men, they determined not to pitch camp, but courageously to set upon them and manfully try the matter by conflict, because the city and the sanctuary and the temple were in danger. So now once after they realized and heard the words and they were all charged up, the spirit entered back into them. They was like, yo, what we doing? We ain't going to pitch camp. We ain't waiting. We're charging force, right? So they said, listen, man, we ain't waiting no longer. Now their adrenaline is running. The spirit is ready. Everything is now put in motion. So they said, we're not going to pitch camp. We're just going to go and take them by conflict. We ain't going to come with words. We ain't going to come with nothing. They want to fight. We're going to give them a fight. Why? Because now we realize the Most High is with us. Once you had that, imagine if you go out to fight and like how during the times, I think it was Elisha, the prophet, when he went out, he could see the angels that was around, and his servant that was there, he couldn't see him. So Elisha was comfortable. He was good. Everything was fine. He wasn't afraid. But his servant was the one that was like, yo, I don't know if we're going to win this. And he asked the Most High to open up his eyes so they could see the angels there. So imagine when you go out anywhere, you go out somewhere and it's a 5, 10, 15 cops, whatever, a militia, tank or whatever that's there, and they coming towards you. But then you look up and then you can see the angels on horses coming. You can see them there and they got their swords pointed at the enemy. You're going to stand there, man. You ready. You probably going to start running towards them yourself. because you know that they ain't going to let nothing happen to you. They got your back. They're your reward, but they're going to fight in front of you. So now your adrenaline is at an all-time high. I think Elder Zaquan was talking about it during the Sabbath service yesterday, how we're going to go and fight. We're going to be the Most High's battle axe, but he's going to have to put his spirit in us. Because right now, most of us ain't got that spirit like the Most High wants us to have. Right now, we lax. We worry about this breakdown and that, and, you know, there's some this and nah. And that day, it's going to be full force. The Most High is going to elevate our spirit onto a whole nother level, and we're going to be able to go out there and execute without question, right? They had that to a certain extent back then when they was ready to just bring forth, right? It says, verse 18, for the care that they took for their wives and their children, their brethren and kinsfolk, was in least account with them, but the greatest and principal fear was for the holy temple, right? Because we just read that Nicanor was looking to destroy the temple, right? He was looking to rebuild another temple to back us over the foundation of where our holy temple was. So that was the thing that they was most afraid of at that time, right? But just like over time, we would need to learn, they didn't know it back then. That's why we read about the scriptures. It tells us that we have a ever more sure prophecy than they had back then, right? Because we know that we are more important than the temple, right? We are the most important thing. The building can be destroyed. Even Yahushua prophesied about no stone being left unturned during that time. So that building, that structure wasn't the most important thing, but we had to learn over time and get us to the point where we are at in these last days. So this is of no fault to these men. This is of no fault to Judas, because they're going off of the knowledge and information that they had for their time, right? So it says again, for the care that they took for their wives and their children, their brethren and kinsfolk, was in least account with them, but the greatest and principal fear was for the holy temple. Also, that they were in the city, and they that were in the city took not the least care, being troubled for the conflict abroad. And now, as all looked what should be the trial, and the enemies were already come near, and the army was set in array, and the beasts conveniently placed, and the horsemen set in wings. Because remember, Nicanor was given the whole core army of elephants. They had horsemen. They had a lot of different things to come and fight against us at that time, but not the Most High, right? It says, verse 21, Maccabeus, seeing the coming of the multitude and the diverse preparations of armor and the fierceness of the beast, stretched out his hand toward heaven and called upon Yahweh that worketh wonders, knowing that victory cometh not by the arms, but even as it seemeth good to him. He giveth it to such as are worthy, right? So as imagine seeing this. They stand there in their formation, but you seeing a diverse type of an army that's coming against you. And they coming, elephants, horsemen, soldiers with swords, some with arrows, some with all kind of things, and you seeing them coming and you got shields and swords in your hand. And in the midst of that, as they coming, he stand up and open up his hands and send up a prayer to the Most High that he would come and defend them, right? And you say to yourself, man, as you hear about this, you say to yourself, man, that's all it takes is the Most High. Yep. Time and time and time and time and time and time again. If you keep his will, if you do his commandments, if you're in the straight, he will feed you. He will clothe you. He will give you water to drink. He will come and protect you. He will do all these things. But you gotta be a person that's doing his will. You can't be like the 2/3. You can't be like those out there who doubt the Most High, who say that there is no God. I can't see him. Make him do something. Well, when he get here, then I'll believe, right? Oh, yeah, I understand, but I'll get to it later on. You can't be like that, because you never know when that time is going to come for you, when you're going to need his help. And when he calls, and when you call upon him, he ain't going to come, he's going to laugh. Read Proverbs chapter 1, I think it's verses 21 on down to the end. And it's going to tell you how the Most High feels about those who make light of this time, this liberty that we have in these last days. Reading on. Verse 22. Oh, let me read Zacharias. Zacharias chapter 4.
Worldly Judas on a militant tip, on a black empowerment tip. Say, are y'all still waiting for Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you better, take action against these white supremacists. You're right, but you're wrong.
That's like right now, we're not in the straight as they are right now in this new proxy war that's going on. But imagine if you were living over there where you've been uprooted out of your house and you got to travel miles, right, to get to a place of succor, right, to find a safe haven, right? Bombs and missiles is being hurled around you, right? And these are supposed to be your own brothers. What makes it even worse? But now you got to flee, and you don't have no protection, because who's coming to your protection but your own? And they can't fight against it. They're not going to be able to sustain it. Whereas with us, when we've been put in these straits, like we read throughout the books of the Maccabees, the Most High was able to come and defend us at certain times, right? Because we know that he didn't allow us to get the ultimate victory. The ultimate victory comes at the end, but he gave us different moments where we can see that those who are righteous, the Lord came and fought for them and fulfilled their prayer or petition, right? Ultimately, we would lose the battle because prophecies had to fulfill themselves. We're fortunate enough to be in the last days where we can become the fulfillment of all of those prophecies. That's the key. So in Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6, it says, "Did he answer and spake unto me, saying, This is the word of the Lord unto Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts." Right? So it's not going to be weapons or numbers and things of that nature. It's going to be by the Most High Spirit that he's going to come and save and redeem and defend us at any point in time. That's how we got to have that ever sure confidence, like Judas did and other righteous men like him in the times of despair. So now, going back, 2 Maccabees chapter 15 and verse 22. It says, "Therefore in his prayer, he said after this manner, O Lord, thou didst send thine angel in the time of Ezekiah, king of Judea," or Hezekiah, right? "And didst slay in the host of Sennacherib 184,500," right? So like we was reading before, how he had to go into the law, into the Bible, and read the times when the Most High came to defend Israel. We ourselves got to be reminded of it. So he had to also, in his prayer, bring back the account when the Most High came to defend us against the Syrians at that time, during the time of Sennacherib. And you can read about that in 2 Chronicles, the 32nd chapter. 2 Chronicles, the 32nd chapter, and specifically verse 21. 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verse 21. It said, "And the Lord sent an angel which cut off all the mighty men of valor and the leaders and captains in the camp of the king of Assyria. So he returned with shame of face to his own land. And when he was come into the house of his God, that they came forth of his own bowels and slew him there with the sword." Check that out, right? So the Most High sent the angel. When you read another chapter, the angel came and killed them all. Israel didn't even have to lift sword. The angel came and wiped them out. And then when this guy left back, he went back and they killed him there. Right? The Most High ain't no joke.
This whole squad was 185,000 people.
Yep. One angel. That's why when you look at Esau and how many fighter jets and F-16s, 22s, 39, 100, whatever they got, right? Stealth bombers, all these different things, right? They got a lot of them. And one chariot could take them all out if it wanted to. One chariot could take them all out. But the rest of them want to have some fun too. In this last day, the rest of them want to have fun. They also want to get in on this, right? Because remembering, this is going to be the last time of things like this is going to happen, right? There's going to be no more war like how we know war today. It's not going to happen anymore. So you'll use one angel there, but when you read in Revelations, it says hundreds of thousands upon thousands is coming, right? That's a lot of angels that's coming in this last day. It's like they all coming from the heavens. The host of heaven going to be empty. Everybody going to be down here in the second and first heaven. All hands on deck, right? And it's going to be a sight to see. Not any day like it before or after. Yep, that's going to be the next major high. That's going to be the highest high holy day of them all. Yep. Exactly. Verse 23, it says, wherefore now also, O Lord of heaven, send a good angel before us for a fear and a dread unto them. And through the might of thine arm, let those be stricken with terror that come against the holy people to blaspheme. And he ended thus. So that was his quick prayer, right? Remember us like during the time of Sennacherib. Send an angel like you did back then and put a spirit in them where they're going to have terror. Like he spoke about in Deuteronomy, the 2nd chapter and the 25th verse, right? Deuteronomy chapter 2. And verse 25. So Deuteronomy 2 and 25 reads, this day will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations that are under the whole heaven, who shall hear report of thee and shall tremble and be in anguish because of thee. So that's what Judas was asking the Most High to change their spirit, to take that manliness out of them, right? Send an angel down to do it. And then let us embark upon the conflict and take them down through war. So we're back in 2 Maccabees chapter 15. We have verse 24. Salak, verse 25. It says, then Nicanor and they that were with him came forward with trumpets and songs. But Judas and his company encountered the enemies with invocation and prayer, right? So you'll see that, when times of war came, you had bands that was in the armies who came singing their own songs that now would, get their soldiers exhorted into fighting, right? So it says that they came forward with trumpets and songs, right? Military sometimes will have that to inspire their soldiers to charge forward, singing their own credos, right? Usually almost every nation has some type of a credo that they sing. This was Nicanor and the rest of the Greeks and those that was with them that was doing that. But then it says, but Judas and his company encountered the enemies with invocation and prayer, meaning good words to exhortation and prayer to the Most High. Verse 27, so that fighting with their hands and praying unto God with their hearts, they slew no less than 35,000 men. For through the appearance of God, they were greatly cheered, right? So as they're fighting, they still have the Most High in mind, in their heart, right? Asking the Most High to continue to keep them victorious in the battle. But then it says, for through the appearance of God, meaning the angel had to have been there, they were greatly cheered, or mean they greatly got the victory, right? So the Most High had an angel present with them because of what he just prayed. Remember, we just read 1 John 3:22. And whatsoever we ask, he will give it to us if we keep his will, if we keep his commandments. Verse 28. Now when the battle was done, returning again with joy, they knew that Nicanor lay dead in his harness. So everything was done now. They coming back. Everybody's cheering. Everybody's doing all cheering, saluting one another, hugging one another, everything. But they knew that the one who had now made an oath that he was going to come and destroy our temple was laying dead in his harness, right? It says, then they made it a great shout and a noise, praising the Almighty in their own language, in the Hebrew, like we just said, right? Kum Yasharala, hallelujah, Yahweh Barakatah, right? Why Yahweh Shah, doing all kind of praises to the Most High in our own language. So now it says, and Judas, who was ever the chief defender of the citizens, both in body and in mind, and who continued his love toward his countrymen all his life, commanded to strike off Nicanor's head and his hand with his shoulder and bring it to Jerusalem. So this is a man who took pride in defending and standing up for Israel, remembering what he had heard that this man had came to the temple and said and done, commanded one of his soldiers, go cut that man's head off. And the hand that he went and said that he was going to do that, cut that off with his shoulder. So someone took a sword and went and chopped that thing off, grabbed it and put it over there, took his head and sliced it off, right? Imagine seeing these things, right? You going and you in war and you seeing these things. Somebody take the head and like how David and them take the head, take it off and put it in a holster and then bring it back to Jerusalem, right? Someone will say that this is gruesome, but nah, you got to realize what this man said and what he did. With his mouth, he said this, cut his head off with his mouth. With his hand, he did this to say that he was going to stand and do this to our people, cut his arm off. We're going to use this as a token to anybody who think they're going to come up against us and our God and think this is going to be prosperous. Let's read on. It says, when he was there, and he called them of his nation together and set the priests before the altar, he sent for them that were of the tower. So now he's come back, setting things in order, right? And them that were in the tower, now he's motioning to them. It says, and showed them the vile Nicanor's head in the hand of the blasphemer, which with proud brags he stretched out against the holy temple of the Almighty. And when he had cut out the tongue of the ungodly Nicanor, he commanded that they should give it by pieces unto the fowls and hang up the reward of his madness before the temple. So now those that was of the heathen that was of those that was in the temple, he went and showed it to him. Look, here you go. And it's the man that had it one disarray. Ain't he the one that made these claims? Right? Go get a knife and cut his tongue out of his mouth for him saying that. Cut it in pieces and feed it to the scavengers. Let them eat it, right? And then take his head and hang it up as a sign or a token to all that come, right? Read verse 33 again. And when he had cut out the tongue of that ungodly Nicanor, he commanded that it should be given by pieces unto the fowls and hang up the reward of his madness before the temple. So every man praised toward the heaven the glorious Lord, saying, blessed be he that hath kept his own place undefiled. Right? We thank the Most High for defending our nation in the temple. Praised him, who's worthy to be praised. Giving him thanksgiving for us getting that victory. That's usually a daily thing, but in this moment in time, it was on another level because, again, we was at war. It says, verse 35, he hanged also Nicanor's head upon the tower, an evident and manifest sign unto all of the help of the Lord. That's what we got to be reminded of. Anybody that's coming against us, if we know that we're the apple of the Most High's eye, we're his portion, we're his inheritance, Most High is not going to have anything happen to us, especially if you keep in his commandments. Most definitely if you following his will. These days when we come and we keep the Sabbath days and we keep them holy, we come to the high holy days, we keep the dietary laws, we keep the moral and civil laws. When we do these things, we're showing our love and gratitude to the Most High. And the Most High is going to reciprocate that to us when he needs to, when he finds it determined, whether it be physical with victuals and things, or whether it be with defense when the times get hard. So this is where we know that he's our help. Verse 36, and they ordained all with a common decree in no case to let that day pass without solemnity. That's why we say this is a solemn day, right? Well, we remember the history of what happened during this time, right? It's not have to look like it's a high holy day, but this is a solemn day that we remember the acts of our brothers and sisters for what they had done in the past. But to celebrate the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the Syrian tongue, is called Adar, the day before Mordecai's day. Mordecai's day, or the days of Purim, which we're about to keep starting tomorrow night. So this was the day before, during that time. So we was already had been keeping Purim, right? Purim had already been kept. This was now ordained the day before Purim, right? And this was now during the month Adar, or in the 12th month, which is the Syrian language of the month, right? That we read here in the history. It says, thus, verse 37, went it with Nicanor. And from that time forth, the Hebrews had the city in their power. And here will make an end, right? So from that time forth, the Hebrews, talking about the children of Israel, because sometimes we'll make a point to say that those nations that come from out of Eber, Ammon, Moab, right? Esau, Ishmael, all of these are Hebrews. But technically, what it's really dealing with is really coming to that seed, that chosen seed that had the covenant, which was Jacob or Israel, that are the real Hebrews, right? That's what the Most High acknowledged. Because if it was not, when it says came that time forth the Hebrews, it would mean all of those nations. But we just went and defeated them. So it can't be talking about them. It's only talking about Israel, right? It says, and if I had done well and is fitting the story, it is that which I desired. But if slenderly and meanly, it is that which I could attain unto. Meaning, he tried to gather as much of the history that was now present during that time to put it in the transcribe here so that we can read and remember this history, right? So he's going off of the memory that he had at that time to keep us the record. Verse 39, for as it is hurtful to drink wine or water alone, and as wine mingled with water is pleasant and delighteth the taste, even so speech finely framed delighteth the ears of them that read the story. And here shall be an end, right? So he's comparing it to when we drink wine with water, how it's palatable to the taste. When you read a good story like this, it's like palatable for your spirit, because as you're reading it, especially for those who probably didn't know that this was part of our history, and then you read what things the Most High did during different times, especially during this time, for our ancient ancestor here, one of the patriarchs, Judas, it should make you feel proud. It should now get you more exhorted to doing righteous things and to sustain yourself in the things that you're doing right now. We come too far to fall short, right? We got to try to continue what we're doing. That's the beauty of us continuing to read these stories, read on the Sabbath days, come to the Tuesdays and Friday night classes, because it keeps us going. When we stop, when we don't do these things, then that's how we begin to wane and wax going back into the world. So we definitely have to make sure that we continue in these things and honor men like this. We give these brothers applause like that who continue to do these efforts that we read in the scriptures, because had it not been for them, they wouldn't have not shown us the way and what we must be doing in these last days. Who knows? Manashah may be called upon to lead a group of people wherever he's at. He's going to have to channel this same energy in the spirit to exhort those that surround him. Nabiyah, where he's at, the Most High may have us separated. We was reading the scriptures where the brother who was Philip, who was at the charity of the eunuch, that was the eunuch that was Ethiopian eunuch, I think it was, in the book of Acts. And after he baptized him, he says the Spirit had where he took him somewhere else. Took him somewhere. He was gone, and the Lord had him way over there somewhere. Who knows? We could be in an area together, and all of a sudden, we're like, yo, where Khan Nabiyah went? Most High done transported him somewhere else to fulfill something else over there that he need to do. That's what the scriptures show us that happens at times. So we just got to be prepared mentally, spiritually, to be able to handle whatever comes before us, like this brother did here, to stand tall for the nation. So again, we say Tawada, Yahawada, right? Thank you to the brother Judas for doing what he did. We honor him on this day, and Most High's will, during the times of our redemption, we can see him, know who he is in the chariots. When we get taken up, we start saying, yo, they go him. Yo, they go him over there. Yo, they go him over there. And you start seeing the brothers and knowing who they are, sisters as well. And then at the same time, we're beholding the judgment of our enemies, like it tells us in the scriptures. We're looking down and seeing what's happening on the earth as it pertains to their judgment. So that's the desires that we should have leading up to the last day, right? The last hour, right? It's on its way. We're getting there closer and closer. The clock is ticking, right? But for today, we're going to enjoy the solemn day of Judas. We're going to, partake in eating some food, fellowshipping, talking about certain things that's going on, whether it be in the world, social, anything to kind of uplift our spirits. And then we're going to also prepare for tomorrow night for the next one, which would be the days of Purim. All right. Anybody wants to come?
For 15 and 33, you can just link Revelations 19, verses 17 and 18. Once again, Revelation 19, verses 17 and 18, link that with 2 Maccabees 15:33, where it's almost like Nick and got like a sneak preview of what all the kings of the earth are going to face.
Mm-hmm.
About the Great Supper.
Con.
And then you were saying it earlier, but I didn't pull it, but you were talking about, the warfare now is somewhat different than back then because, knowledge shall be increased, men go to and fro. Isaiah 9 and 5. Read that down too.
Isaiah chapter 9, verse 5.
Right. Where it talks about with the confused noise and garments woven in blood. He said, but this, referring to the battle to come, is going to be a burning and full of fire.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, nuclear destruction.
Con. That's why it's funny when Joe Biden said it the other day, he's like, if we go into Ukraine, that's Third World War. You do know that. We will not fight the Third World War in Ukraine. You know how you talk. Right? And then they started talking about the possibilities if that was to happen of nuclear, right? Now it's funny because before any talk of nuclear war was like, forbidden, like, no, we're not there yet. Now it's like, it's kind of like, this is where we at. We at a point where we know that with them, it's going to get nuclear, right? It's funny that because he threatened to use it last week because of all the sanctions and everything else. And they're like, I think he's using this, for us to just stop, right? Like he's that crazy that, he wants us to believe that he's that crazy that he can go and push a button. And because of it, we should just kind of like stop. But he's using it as a ploy. He knows that we're going to do that. So that's what he's looking for. He's expecting. So this is the conversation now that we have to prepare ourselves for, or the world, not us. Everyone else has to prepare themselves for, because we knew this for years that this was coming. So the only way we're going to get out of it, this and the Most High and the keeping of his law. And we'll be defended just like Judas Maccabees was. All right. So with that, we're going to say Ashar Yawam Yahawada, or Happy Day of Judas in the Hebrew. Most High's will, everyone was able to get the understanding on this history. Enjoy the rest of the evening and the day. And the Lord's will, we will also see each other tomorrow night for the first day of Purim. But for this day, we'll enjoy this day and try to keep him in mind as the events and things continue on. What the world is fearful of, we're waiting for our redemption. So with that, again, Shalom, Shah Yawam Yahawada, and stay tuned for the closing prayers. Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shah, Asherah, Nathalanawa, Par Yahagapin, Thawada Amun, La Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shah, Ath, Yasha Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shah, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shah, with Israel. And Madu upon you, Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Baba Koshai, Shemai, Lanawa, Aitha, Yam Yun, Aitha, Shalat, Mayaka Allah, Waha Allahayim, Azwadakim, La, Shemaiah, Barak, Rapah, Magun, Wahakazayak, Banya, Yasha Allah, Washalat, Lanawa, Rabiam, Kakama, Rabiam Da'ai, Rabiam Bayana, Rabiam Sabalunwa, Rabiam Amawan, Rabiam Aqua, Rabiam Ahabiam, Rabiam Hagana, Rachanaya, Wasalat, Kal, Kata Ayamnawa, Laha Akim, Wa Akiwath, Wa Yasha Allah, Thum Yad, Wa Iwalam, Ba'asham, Yahawashai, the water, Amen. Most High, in the name of Christ, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers of angels to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection. And forgive all our sins for the brothers and sisters and Israel always and forever. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. For corners prayer. Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawa, Wayasha Allah, Wabath Yasaparium, Shema, Yasharella, Yahweh, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh, Achad. English translation. Most High in the name of Christ, bless up. Most High in the name of Christ, or Yahweh in the name of Yahweh Shah, bless us and Israel in the house of books or schools. And Deuteronomy 6:4, hear, O Israel, the Lord our power is one power. All right, and the blessing of the food. Yahweh, Gadawal, Bahasham, Adawanya, Yahweh Shai, Baba Koshah, Barak, Ma'akal, Yanawa, Shatayawa, Yanawa, Yayun, Yanawa, Lakam, Yanawa, Shakarai, Yanawa, Hayawum, Yahawada, Bahasham, Yahawashai, Tawada, Amun. All right. So with that, we'll say Ashar, Yawum, Yahawada, and Most High's will. Everybody will enjoy the rest of the day We'll see each other or hear from each other tomorrow night. Shalom.